All right, exceptionally cleared. We have now crossed the threshold here and covered all of the main things that one was hoping to find when looking at this case for the very first time. Everything should have been laid out. The Apple Valley Police Department, the BCA, Dakota County Sheriff's Office, the medical examiners, right? Everybody that was involved. We've kind of gone through pretty much everything now up until this point here. And that would be ending on page 84 or 85 of the physical book, The Gray Stage by Greg Fernandez Jr. That is me, obviously. And so we've now come to the conclusion of exceptionally cleared by the police officers and their view of pretty much closing the case here. So I hope you have enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. Do apologize for any audio issues that you may have heard or noticed. We're all just doing the best that we can with what we have here, and the main goal is just to keep the case going. So we've done our best. We'll continue to do our best to keep this case alive. We appreciate all of the help that everybody has given us. Another thing you probably have noticed here, we're 20 episodes into this, and I do have a stutter, and I believe that I was born with it. And sometimes it's okay, sometimes it comes out a little bit more, so I want to apologize for that too. It's just something, for my whole life I've tried to kind of work through it, work with it, and to not be afraid of it, and to get better. And obviously, doing podcasts, doing shows like that really does help me. And in this episode, listening back to episode 20, I could tell I was having a really rough time with it. So unfortunately, that's going to happen sometimes, but I hope it doesn't ruin the quality of the show, or what people think about the show. Obviously, it really is just to make sure that the information is out there, to keep talking about it, to keep discussing it, and to kind of give you a little more view, a little deeper view on some of our thoughts on this case too. So I do hope that kind of helps. And unfortunately, the stuttering is something we're just gonna have to deal with and just do our best with. I'll have to do my best with it, and you as the audience will have to do your best to try to get past it if you can, hopefully. But I did really notice that this episode, a few episodes, but this episode I could tell I was really struggling with my stutter. So and it does come out sometimes. Some days are better than others, obviously, hopefully. So I wanted to cover that and just let everybody know we are at kind of that point here. I mean, we're about halfway through this book, and so at this point, we have the 94 pages, we have the documents. We don't have a lot of the documents that are mentioned in the earlier chapters, but I didn't want to, say, oh, now we got all this new documents, put that in a whole new section. I figured it'd be better just to kind of give you everything right up front. And so we've covered all of the documents, all of that stuff that we have, and we see what the Apple Valley Police decided to conclude with this case. As far as they're concerned, the case is closed, and that's what's the name of this chapter, Closing the Case. And so that's, and it's exceptionally cleared is their final conclusion as of right now, until we can get the case reopened. That's where they stand. So with that in mind, next month, October 1st, we will cover Tom Lyden. Will begin. This is still in the Closing the Case chapter, and so Tom Lyden, I felt, kind of put his stamp of approval on this, on the allegations against David, on the conclusions by the Apple Valley Police Department. So I figured I also would include what Tom Lyden says, Tom Lyden's quote-unquote news report that he did 1 year after the bodies were found. So I feel like his interview with the Apple Valley Police Chief, several detectives, and whoever else really kind of puts a stamp of approval on the official theory. And I think this was meant to pretty much be the final word on it, and that was supposed to be it. And then, the goons could go on and hijack David's work and try to make money off of his Gray State project instead of coming up with something on their own. None of these guys have anything even close to what David did with the popularity or anything like that. Nothing even close. So this was their meal ticket. David was their meal ticket. And with him gone, that is pretty much done, over and out. So on October 1st, we'll cover pages 85, and we'll continue that. This is a two-part one. We'll continue that on November 1st as well. So if you want to pretty much get caught up on that, you can read pages 85 to 89, and that will be what we cover here for the next couple months, for the next 2 months. So if you have not seen Tom Lyden's Fox 9 News report, it's about 20 minutes. It is worth watching. Can be difficult to watch, and you can tell it is just a complete hit piece to make David Crowley look guilty. Some of those clips in Tom Lyden's piece were used for Eric Nelson's film, A Gray State, so you'll be able to see that, but this is pretty much the whole thing, and one day we will go through and watch Tom Lyden's, do like a watch-along or something. We'll watch Tom Lyden's 20-minute news report, hit piece on David Crowley, and kind of go through it. So that's what's going to be coming up, and like I said, Tom Lyden, Fox 9 News investigator, quote-unquote investigator, so he says, and he interviewed Apple Valley Police Chief John Reichel. And so throughout this, I'm kind of waiting for Tom Lyden to hit the police chief and some of these other guys with some hard-hitting questions about the documents, about the missing bullet hole, just to kind of bring it up and kind of get their thoughts on it, get the explanation, talk about the DNA results, talk about the autopsies, the ballistics reports, the firearms, the toxicology. And he didn't talk about any of that. I found it very strange. At that point, too, at this point, 1 year after, David's death, I had not seen a lot of that stuff. I don't believe I had seen any of that yet. So, but it was curious that he wasn't talking about it. And, of course, if you read the DNA results and the autopsies and the firearms report and all of that stuff, the electronic stuff, you can clearly see why he didn't mention it, because there's nothing in there to help prove David Crowley guilty. So they just kind of bypassed it and didn't even talk about it, didn't mention it. So that was pretty interesting, obviously, but so it gets into that. It pretty much just covers Tom Lyden's news report and what he does say, and the chief thought that David Crowley snapped, and then they go over who wrote Allahu Akbar on the wall. The police chief says that it was David, but we know that there's no evidence that it was David. Like, why even say that? Why assume that? And then Tom Lyden should have said, okay, based on what? Did you guys find David's prints there? No. Did you find his latent prints? No. Did you find David's DNA? No. Well, you're only going to find Kamel's DNA most likely because it's blood, right? It's her blood. But why would you just think that David Crowley, wrote Allahu Akbar on the wall? So it just goes into kind of that. It's mostly a lot of the questions, kind of the stuff that I was hoping Tom Lyden would bring up, and all the stuff that he chose not to bring up. I don't know what Tom Lyden has. I know he's received thousands of pages of documents and some photos, but I don't know if he actually read them or looked at them, because that would be a big difference. If he never looked at them, if he was just too lazy to look at them, that's one thing. But if he looked at the documents and then still tried to say that all of this shows David Crowley is guilty, that's not a very good investigative news reporter. Now, obviously, if he didn't look at the reports, what is he investigating? What is he reporting on? It's not the documents. It must be something else. Hypotheticals, allegations, theory, speculation, but the documents show the facts. And looking at those facts, that is why so many of us are convinced, and I think any sane person would have to come to that conclusion that there simply is just nothing that proves David Crowley guilty. You can want to believe he is, you can assume he is, you can guess he is, but you cannot say that looking inside of those documents that that it proves David Crowley guilty. It simply does not. None of that is talked about. And Eric Nelson's film pretty much follows up on that same thing. They just don't talk about it. The chief says that David's family was the ideal family, right? It looks like David snapped and took the life of his wife, but again, it's like, why? What there shows you that David snapped when you have all this stuff that you clearly have already come to the conclusion that there's no motive, there's nothing in the documents that show any evidence of why David did this. So it's a very contradictory thing that we're hearing. If you just read the police reports, you kind of get the idea of, wow, they're not convinced David Crowley is guilty. And so this interview with the chief, and watch the chief, look at him during this interview, is one of the most uncomfortable. He looks very uncomfortable, like he does not want to be there and does not know exactly what he should say or should not say. Kind of scripted, and yeah, we'll just go with that, I suppose. But I mean, it looks like David snapped, he says, from all accounts. He was consumed with producing this film. It was a dark topic. Here you're talking about conspiracy theories and potentially the fall of society. And if you're focusing on that day in and day out in these materials you're working with, and you're filming exclusively on that topic, that can take you to a very bad place. Even though we know David was working on other scripts and other stories, that's in his journal, right? That's all there. And they had this journal. So you just read it and you're like, you guys know, you knew better than this. And, you know, I don't want to say all the Apple Valley Police Department, because what we're getting here is from the actual chief here. So we don't know if all of the other officers, publicly or privately, feel the same way. They may not. They may have some different thoughts, some different views on what the chief is saying. Obviously, they're probably not going to come out and say that. A quote here from Tom Lyden that I felt was necessary on page 87 to put in. Tom Lyden says, judging by the mail piling up in a paper in the home, the murder-suicide took place the day after Christmas. David shooting Kamel twice in the head, Rania once, before shooting himself. Between the bodies, a Quran with pages torn out, open to a traditional forgiveness prayer. And we know that, I think Catherine did a video on this too. Make sure you check that out if you haven't checked out Catherine's latest video. She did a great one on the blood too, the bloody clothing. But the forgiveness prayer, it's not a forgiveness prayer, right? I don't know where they got that from, where that started with. The police reports say it started with Sidra, Kamel's sister. So, but if you read the actual photo, which I don't think we were supposed to get again, so there would be, you know, we would just have to take their word for it, and which we did until we got all the documents and all the photos and all this stuff. And it's like, are we living in a parallel world here? Are we in the same universe? Because the documents are saying one thing, you have family, friends saying something completely different. Nobody's story is lining up, but they all try to come back to the same conclusion, and they all discount the possibility that maybe their theory is wrong. I mean, that's why what I really tried to do in this book up until this point here is just look at the documents, look at the facts, look at all of the stuff that is in the reports that we got. That's what these first 80 some odd pages are. Just focused on that. And then of course Tom Lyden, and we get into Tom Lyden stuff here. So I mean, you know, him saying about the mail was piling up in a newspaper in the home. Well, the newspaper in the home, you know, there was also the newspaper in the home is one thing, right? But those are weekly newspapers. So the delivery date for those papers is in question. In the podcast episode that we did about the kitchen, we cover not only that newspaper, but I do believe in one of the we may cover it in that same podcast, but we cover the newspaper that was also found outside, which was dated January 6th. And there's a lot of questions about when that was also brought into the home. So, but just regarding the newspaper they found in the kitchen trash can, we have again three different stories. We have the delivery driver who gives us one date of when he dropped it off at the Crowley home. We have the newspaper coordinator who gives us several dates of when that could have happened. And then we have the delivery driver's mom who gives us another date of when that paper could have been dropped off. So they don't really know. They don't even know when the paper could have been dropped off. But if you check out the coordinator, the newspaper coordinator, I believe she said December 23rd. Well, I mean, that's well over, even if we want to believe that they died on December 25th or December 26th, that still leaves a big range of dates for that. So it's just all speculative stuff that they're throwing at you, hoping that you're not going to look any deeper into it. It's a subconscious way. It's kind of like a brainwashing technique, right? So that you subconsciously just tie some of these things that they're saying to David Crowley being guilty. He snapped. He was working on this movie. He went to a dark place, right? All of that. They never really look at the evidence. They never really look at the documents. They don't really talk about that. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they not? That seems like the first thing that they should do, or would want to do, but apparently not. So, yeah, so we'll go through that. A little bit of Mason Hendricks, where he says that this has nothing to do with Islam, but everything to do with a man who lost his way. And then he also says that David wrote Allahu Akbar sarcastically. That's him possibly throwing a jab, but that would be a jab. And then Tom Lyden asks a jab at Kamel's family, and Hendricks answers possibly, but that would have to do with Islam. So it would have to be something to do with Islam. So even in his own statements here, the contradictions you can see, it's just a sample of the many contradictions that we get, that we have, that they tell, and why. It makes no sense. Why hide anything? Why be deceptive? Why play these games? Why purposely lie to us? It doesn't make sense. If you really want to help us get to the truth, you would not lie. There wouldn't be any need to lie. Everybody's stories would line up. Everything would match up, and it doesn't. So here we are. And that is on page 87. And then, so yeah, this was broken down into 2 episodes. So I'm looking forward to sharing both of those with you. And I hope they're beneficial. I hope that you do take the 20 minutes to watch Tom Lyden's news report at some point. If you just type in Tom Lyden, David Crowley, Fox News 9 into YouTube, it should probably pop up. And decide for yourself. So, yeah, and that's pretty much where it kind of ends. Danny Mason is in that too. And Mason Hendricks. Of course, Hendricks is one of the more curious characters because he is one of the first people to be out on the news circuits after David dies. But he is not mentioned in any police reports, in any of the documents, ever, whatsoever. None. Nothing. So how does this guy know so much about this case, going so far as to send me a photo of the CD that he got from the police records, from their documents? I've shown it a couple times. I believe in the closing the case, if you look at the photo for closing the case, and you'll see it's a CD. It says ADPD. That's Hendrix's photo. That's he sent me that, and obviously what he got is not what we got. He got a lot more, and that's lawsuit stuff. That's very disconcerting. It's yeah. Anyways, that's something we'll definitely come back to at a later point. But if you file a public records request and I file a public records request, we should get the same data. And if that's not happening, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. okay? Because I'm not trying to accuse Apple Valley Police of any foul play or covering up or anything like that, man. But I mean, you just some of their actions just do not make sense to me. I love the way Tom Lyden ends his news report, just playing right in to the propaganda here. Family members on both sides decline to talk on camera. Quite frankly, they're afraid they'll be harassed by some of these conspiracy theorists out there. And let me tell you something about the conspiracy theorists. The biggest conspiracy theorists are the ones who accuse David Crowley of this crime. That's a theory. You're all conspiring into this theory. Regardless of where it started, who it popped into whose head first, you're all conspiring against David Crowley at this point. It is a theory, and it is a conspiracy. You are all conspiring to try to convince the world that David Crowley is guilty, knowing that he's not, knowing that the evidence does not support the allegations, period. So there it is. I look forward to everybody listening to the next couple podcasts. The video version of episode 20, Exceptionally Cleared podcast, the Gray Stage podcast, episode 20, titled Exceptionally Cleared. The video version will be out maybe in another day or two, a couple days, maybe this weekend. But the audio version is out right now on all major platforms, all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, including Amazon Music. Now it's on Amazon. So audible.com, it's also there. You can go to anchor.fm/The Gray Stage. You'll find it there. It's on Spotify, Breaker, Google Play, whatever. It's wherever you listen to your podcast, most likely it's there. All right, until next time, God bless you all.